Death of a Nation, Chapter 5, Zola. Zola stared up at the ceiling. The moonlight illuminated the cracks in the wooden blocks that held it together. Zora's back curled and straightened ever so slightly against Zola's arm as she snored. Zola assured Zora that she was fine before Zora fell asleep, but the truth was, she was far from it. Not only was she afraid she might slip back into a coma if she went to sleep, but the idea that her own mama tried to murder her kept her awake. Zola glanced over at her sister. How could she have borne all of this alone and still be able to rest? She couldn't imagine the pain she had been through. Zola's mind wandered to the cot a few feet away from theirs. Mama's cot. Empty. Where was Tata? She had been awake for hours and she hadn't seen him yet. She remembered the vision she had when she was asleep. Tata grabbing her shoulder. It felt so real, like he was right there with her, but when she tried to touch him, he faded away. Her stomach churned. Zola convinced herself that Tata was somewhere working so that they could get out of this shack and move into something they were more accustomed to. Zola looked down at the cot she shared with her sister. And a real bed. As the thoughts flowed into each other, something deep inside her told her that it wasn't true. Life would never be the same. Hours went by and the sun replaced the moon in the sky. Zola didn't allow her eyes to close longer than to blink the entire night. Zora rolled over. How'd you sleep? Zola feigned a yawn. Good, and you? Zora stood up and stretched. Good. Zola glanced over at the empty cot, then at Zora, who was wiping the sleep out of her eyes. Mama never came back home. Zora made a face Zola couldn't distinguish between anger or disgust. That's fine. I didn't expect her to. Zora walked into the kitchen area of the shack. Zora! Zola called out, but received no answer. Zora! She said again. Zora! Zola shouted. Her throat had healed a bit since yesterday, so yelling didn't hurt as much. What? Zora popped back into Zola's sight. Stop ignoring me, Zola commanded. I'm not ignoring you. I'm getting ready, Zora responded with a hint of saltiness. Getting ready for what? Zola barked. Work, Zora responded, straightening her shirt. Work? Why are you working? Zola frowned. We couldn't afford the house, so Mama and I are working off the debt. Zora's voice dropped to a silent mumble. Where is Tata? He would never allow this to happen. Zora searched the tiny shack with her eyes. It was mostly open space. The only furniture were the two cots and the wagon. She spotted a few items of clothing that could belong to either Zora or her mama, but nothing manly, nothing of their tatas. Her breathing became more flustered as she continued to scan over the tiny area over and over again, hoping that something would pop up that could belong to her tata. All the while, the color from Zora's face drained like a vacuum was hooked up to her cheek. Zola, Zora said softly. Zola looked at everything but her sister. Mama's cot, the wagon, the floors, the ceiling. Zola! Zora shouted this time. Zola looked up at her sister. With tiny drops of tears falling down her cheeks, Zora said what Zola feared she would. Tata is dead. Before the words left her lips, Zola felt like flames had combusted inside of her chest. She grabbed the area above her heart. She hadn't realized she was shaking until she felt Zora's arms close around her. Why? What happened? Zola finally mustered up the words to say. Zora began to stutter. We were leaving the house, coming here, and some men attacked us and tried to take me, and they... Zola touched her sister's arm. I get it. Zora planted her face into Zola's chest. Within moments, Zola could feel the wetness of her tears seeping through the thin fabric. Zola thought about the last time she saw Tata. At the dinner table, frustrated because of the argument he and Zora had about politics. It was unbelievable that he was not here. Someone she pictured to be so tough and strong, almost invincible. And now he was dead, and it was all her fault. She knew that if she hadn't been unconscious, Tata would have found a way to live. Her burden had ruined the family she held so dear. Tata was dead. Mama had gone crazy, and Zora was broken. Maybe it had been better if she had just died when the house landed on her. Don't think that, Zora said, sniffing. Zola frowned. Had she said that aloud? She could have sworn she didn't. Zora wiped her face and stood up. I have to go to work, sissy. Did you hear me? Zola asked, attempting to get up and failing. Her legs hadn't recovered from the months of lying in that wagon. Hear what? Zora raised her eyebrows and chuckled. You're hearing things. I heard what you said, Zora, Zola insisted. I have to go. I'll be back later. There's some food over there if you need some. She pointed to the big bowl of soup that was a couple of feet from where the cot was. And if Mama comes home, stay on your guard. All the playfulness from her face and voice was replaced by a stern seriousness. Okay, Zola responded, but before she could try to say anything else, Zora was out the door. Minutes felt like hours as Zola fought the urge to fall asleep. Just when she thought she had lost the fight, a loud whistle signaled what Zora had warned her as the earthquake from hell. The tiny house nearly shook from its foundation as a train passed by. Zola hadn't seen railroad tracks when they followed their mama into the market, so where the train was coming from was a mystery to her. After the house had finally settled, Zola found herself a few inches from the bowl of soup that had been dumped of half its contents. She decided to eat it before something else happened. She sipped it straight from the bowl. The liquid went down her throat cold and thick like paste. Out of her peripheral, she could see the silhouette of something standing outside the window by the door. Zola dropped the bowl. It was large. The head shifted left to right. A claw-like hand raked over the front door. It nearly pulled the thin piece of wood from its rusted hinges. Zola crawled back as far as her limp limbs would take her. Zora's name squeaked out of her mouth. Immediately realizing how futile that was, she flattened herself as closely against the wall as she possibly could. Just maybe, whatever, whoever, she corrected herself, this was, wouldn't notice me. The door continued to rattle. The brass knob twisted and turned until finally everything stopped. Zora? The voice had a slight richness to it that hinted the figure was male, but not completely. Zola covered her mouth. I know someone's in there. Zora, I'm sorry. Just talk to me. The figure sounded almost genuine. Zola focused on the voice more clearly now. She recognized that voice. Jubilani? Zora? You sound different. Are you okay? Jubilani responded. No, this is Zola, Zola said. You're awake? Wow, I'm so glad you made it through. She could hear Jubilani's big smile in his tone. I'm glad that it's you and not something else. What do you mean something else? Is someone after you? No, well, yes. It's complicated. You have to talk to Zora about it. Zola trusted Jubilani more than any of Zora's other friends, but bringing people into their problems was something they did not do, and she was not about to start. Zola heard Jubilani let out a loud breath. We haven't talked in a while. I did something and now she's mad at me. Can I just come inside and wait for her? I need to apologize. Zola looked down at her legs. Even if she could, she wouldn't. There was a lot more going on than Zola believed she knew about, and if Zora and one of her best friends weren't speaking, there had to be a legitimate reason for it. Best case scenario, Zora was just upset with him about something stupid. But her sister was the type to blow up on everyone around. Zola owed it to her sister not to put her in an even tougher position. No, Jubilani, I can't. You'll have to wait until Zora gets home and then you can see her. If she wanted to see him, Zola thought, but decided not to say. Okay, I understand. It was good seeing you, Zola. Well, talking to you. I'm really glad you're okay. You too, Zola called out. She could hear his footsteps crunching against the ground as he walked away. Zola snickered. A blind man could see how much love Jubilani had for her sister. He could also see how hopeless Jubilani was because Zora would never date him, or any man for that matter. God help the man she does end up being with. Zola was convinced the only man who could handle Zora's wild nature was their Tata. The thought of him stabbed at her chest. She had to get her mind off of that. Zola searched the small house, but there was nothing to do that would entertain her until Zora came back. Sleep, a tiny voice in the back of her mind called out. She pushed that thought away. She was not going to sleep. She had been asleep far too long, and the last place she wanted to be was inside her own mind, where she had no control over her thoughts. Time passed, and her thoughts began to swirl together into blobs of meaningless scenes from different parts of her life. Sleep washed over her. The idea of a quick nap became more and more appealing. The bare wall of the shack was consumed by darkness beyond her eyelids. A loud bang reverberated throughout the house. Zola awoke. "Zola! Zola!" Jubilani yelled. "Go away!" Zola waved him off. "No, you have to let me in," Jubilani demanded. "No, I already told you, not until Zora comes back." "Zora? Wait, what? I haven't talked to you today. I didn't even know you were awake until Zora just told me." Zola wiped her face. "Jubilani, what are you talking about? You were just here." "No, I wasn't. I was in the market, waiting for Zora to get off work so I could talk to her. Why would I come to her house when I know she has work today?" Zola's heart dropped. What was going on? She was almost certain that she was talking to Jubilani earlier. "Zora is in trouble. She sent me to come get you. You have to open the door." Zola looked at the door. Was she dreaming? She tried to pull herself up. She couldn't because in her dream she wasn't handicapped. This was real, and Zora was in real danger. Zola crawled towards the door. The sound of glass shattering erupted from behind her. Zola looked back, and Jubilani stood in the area they considered their kitchen. "I was coming," Zola explained, sitting up from her crawling position. Jubilani stood still. Light spilled in from the broken window, illuminating his face. His dark skin glimmered in the sunlight. His eyebrows drew into his face like hard arrows, and brown eyes stared unblinkingly at her. An eerie feeling crept up Zola's spine. "Jubilani?" she breathed. "Zola, open the door!" Jubilani called out from behind the front door. Zola stared at the creature that flawlessly resembled the boy she knew. It began to walk towards her. Zola's muscles froze in place. Right before her eyes, the creature began to change. The brown eyes shifted to one red eye in the middle of its forehead. Its nose flattened into two oval-shaped holes. Its mouth spread wide, revealing hundreds of long, sharp incisors. Ears like those of a donkey sprouted out of the top of its head. The body elongated into almost double Jubilani's already impressive height, scraping the edge of the ceiling. Its arms became winged. Zola's body quivered as she looked upon the most hideous red creature she had ever seen in her entire life. Nothing about it was human or animal, but like a strange mixture of both. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Long strings of slob dripped down from the creature's mouth as it stretched its headed wing towards Zola. Suddenly, the front door flew open and a figure dressed in turquoise armor tumbled inside. The creature shot back. Like a small tornado, the armored figure and the creature circled around each other, beating and slashing. Zola's muscles loosened and she backpedaled her way out of the door. Jubilani was nowhere to be found. Zola hurried towards the dirt road. Something took hold of her arm, yanking her from the ground. She stared up into the peach-colored eyes of a brown-skinned woman whose beauty rivaled her mama's in her prime. "Come with me if you want to live."